there's something stopping women from doing their work. And what I've come across is just fear over and over again. Fear of being seen, fear of failure, fear of our own feelings. So in music, they can express like, you hurt me, ow, I love you. But there's a lot of stuff. And the main thing is anger, like that anger that women have that they can't get out. Creating art is just two things. It's having feelings and expressing them.
I dreamt that you were twisting through seven.
Oh my God. Hi, everybody. I have no idea how this podcast is going to turn out. It's Veronica. Welcome to the Soberful podcast. And I know I say, every month I have special guests and I kind of use the same description. I have very special guests. Well, today I have I have an extraordinary guest. So the reason my guest is extraordinary, and you'll find out, is so this podcast has been going for almost 5 years. And when I started it, I needed some intro music. And that's all very complicated with all the reasons that you can't use other people's music. Anyway, luckily, my best friend is a incredible musician. And I was like, oi, do you have a bit of music I can use for my podcast? Which is the music that you hear every time you listen to the podcast. It's a piece called Jasmine, and it's written by my oldest and dearest and bestest friend, Sarah Gillespie. Sarah, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we have talked about doing this for some time because there's a lot. It's really interesting. Well, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah is a British-American singer-songwriter. She has toured internationally for over 12 years and received outstanding reviews for all 4 of her albums, which are amazing. And she, in 2020, launched the Create Now Academy. And one of the things that Sarah does is she coaches and works with other women to produce and bring their art into the world. And we're going to talk about that because that's where we noticed a lot of similarities. Because what I do basically is personal development for sober people. I help people with their feelings. And that's actually also what Sarah does too. And we just thought it would be a really interesting conversation. But first of all, Sarah, do you want to tell everybody how we met?
Okay, so Veronica and I met when we were 16 years old. And I had been going out with this guy. We'll try not to mention his name. It's embarrassing. I've been going out, and we met in North Norfolk where we both grew up. And I've been going out with this guy on and off. It was a volatile, passionate, on and off relationship. And just as I was about to take him back, I heard on the grapevine that he'd met this absolutely gorgeous girl and that they were now an item together. And of course, I suddenly wanted him more than ever. And I walked into the local pub, and that was the first time I saw Veronica. And she had legs up to her. She's like your worst nightmare. Legs up to her ears, these gorgeous big eyes, and looked really kind of punky and cool. And I was massively intimidated. And basically, we found out later when we had a conversation, which was, when would have that was that about, I don't know, I can't remember the chronology of it.
No, it's lost to the mists of time. It was such a long time ago now.
It was, but we basically had a night, we called it the envelope night, because we found out the times that we'd been overlapping and where he'd been double dabbing, as it were.
So we did. So I kind of knew of Sarah. Obviously, I hated her because she was my rival.
Veronica.
Yeah, so we hated each other. That was established.
Yeah,
and we're in drama class together, theatre studies in our A-levels. Now, I started it and you transferred in or something. And I heard
that's true.
I heard you were going to be, you were somewhere else, and then you transferred in. I heard you were coming. And it was, it was sort of like lipsticks at dawn. And we was, in our drama group, just scoping each other out. And I'll tell you what happened for me is I absolutely hated you. And then I hated you more because I found that I liked you. And I thought, this can't, what? You were funny and smart and nice. And I just began to like you. And really that annoyed the hell out of me. And then we just became friends, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Pretty fast friends.
Yeah.
Because then when we were 18, I went off to the US and did a road trip with our
Yeah.
other friend, and we were in Key West, and I invited you to come out and visit us.
Yeah, yeah. The whole reason I ended up in Key West, Florida, which you've heard me talk about on the show, was because of Sarah. And probably, even though I married an American, that's why I came back, I do feel like I never, before I met you, had any inclination to go to America whatsoever. So you had such a major part of me coming to America. Sarah's mum was from Minnesota. So kind of, I learned a lot about it. Well, and I lived in the Midwest, and I don't know if I told you this, but you always used to describe your mum as from the Midwest. And I always found that confusing because I was like, why don't you just say she's American? Like, I didn't really understand why that being in the Midwest was a particular thing until I lived in the Midwest. And then I was like, oh, I get there's a kind of state of mind and mentality from being in the Midwest that I can now see was in your mum. And I know, so your glorious American mother in Norfolk.
Yeah. The most incongruous woman ever.
Yeah. So, and we've been really best friends ever since. And we message each other pretty much every day about our kids and our work and all of that kind of stuff. You have an album coming out soon. How did that go? You were in Germany recording it, weren't you?
Yeah, so it's my 5th album, and I have recorded 4 albums and 3 EPs in the same studio in London, which I love, and it's where Adele records, Mumford and Sons, Katie Tunstall, loads of artists. It's called Eastcote, and I love it there, and I love the engineer I work with, but I just felt like I wanted to change it up. Like if you go to a restaurant and you love a dish so much that you never ever try anything else.
Yes, you kind of want to, but you don't want to be disappointed. So you just have your thing. Yeah.
And and the piano player that I work with, I've been working with him for like 13 years, I think. Kit Downs. He's relocated to Berlin, and he said, "Come out and record in Hansa," which is a legendary studio in Berlin where David Bowie and Lou Reed recorded. And so me and my whole band went out there, and it was absolutely, I'm so happy with it. I had a chest infection the whole time, and there's a husk in my voice and bits of me coughing, which I need to sort out. But the spirit of it, I am so happy with it. And I think because of the work that I've been doing with women and creativity, I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm leaving in a lot of the vulnerable mistakes. And we all recorded it live together. So there's no separation. So I can't go and add lots of other stuff because the timing when you play together without a click track is all wobbly. So it's a whole different approach. And we're very pleased.
And what are the songs about? Because you've written over the years, quite political sometimes.
Yep, sometimes. There is a sort of tango thing that's got elements of politics, but mainly like they're story songs, and one song about a lot of people's mental health issues in the pandemic. Like a lot of people close to me really lost it, and during that time we were in North Norfolk coast of the United Kingdom. My partner is from South America, so both of us going, what the hell are we doing here, trapped on this bit of marshland, for over a year? We can't go anywhere. And during that time, we'd go to the beach, and these geese would fly in from Russia and Belarus and Norway and, Northern Europe. And then they fly on to Southern Europe. And it was so weird, like standing there trapped, never able to go anywhere, watching nature and migration happen. So one of the songs is about that. And what's weird is I tried to hide the melancholia of that song by playing it really upbeat. When I got in the studio, Kit Downs was saying to me, I really think you need to break it down. This is a fragile song. Like, it's vulnerable. Let's strip it back. It doesn't need to be high tempo. And I was quite a brat, and I was like, no, I don't like it like that. I like it like this. I'm not doing it. He said, just trust me. So I said, all right, I'll do it once. So I did it with him. And he said, right, I'm going to just play piano over this one bit. And I went into the mixing room to listen back, and I just burst into tears.
Wow.
Because there is this really fragile, vulnerable feeling in there that even I, as much as I blab on about owning your feelings and all that stuff, I didn't really want it to be so seen, you know? And he saw that, and he's also from Norwich, by the way, in North Norfolk, so he understands the landscape, because it talks about the salt flats and the marshes and the North Sea and the birds and the arcades that people feed money into, and it's a whole thing. So so a cheery number, and and there's a lot of really fun songs on there too. And we're launching it at Ronnie Scott's on the 8th of October in London, and then touring.
Yeah. Will you come to America, do you think?
Yeah. I want to do South by Southwest in March 2024. I'll rephrase that. I'm going to do South by Southwest in 2024, March, and then do a handful of gigs, maybe New Mexico, maybe New York. But that's my plot going forward.
Oh, I hope so. I want to try and come over for that date in October. And we have lots of people listening all over the place. So who knows? Somebody here will own a venue or know a venue that would have you. I want to talk about vulnerability, and because that is both of our work. My work is very much about creating a safe space so people can finally be vulnerable, because that's the only way that they can begin to heal what's going on with them. But it's also part of your work. And we've had lots of interesting conversations. You work mostly with women who really want to create art. They really have music in them or a book in them. Yeah. But what do you see? How do they keep sabotaging themselves? What's the process that you see happening?
There's quite a few things. And I started doing this work during lockdown in 2020. I'd always done songwriting workshops, but I started expanding it and then delivering mentorship programs. And at first I was working with men and women. I wasn't setting out to only work with women, and I still see men one-to-one occasionally. But what I noticed pretty quickly was the women who were attracted to my work, who were coming in and wanting to work with me, were incredibly, incredibly talented and really blocked. And I think, and I was kind of confused by this, because I've not paid attention to that issue in my life. I've just had a successful career touring. So I haven't dwelled on being a woman in the music industry or what that means in a larger cultural context or anything like that. But what I noticed is women would come, and they seem to get blocked in two big ways. One is an inability to finish their work sometimes, or start it, or really get to grips with it. And the other is, when they've done the work, an inability to put it out into the world. And so during this time, I started researching it, and I found out that in the United Kingdom, where I live, 82.7% of professional songwriters and composers are men. So there's something stopping women from doing their work. And what I've come across is just fear, over and over again. Fear of being seen, fear of failure, fear of our own feelings. And the way it plays out often with some of the women I've worked with is that they can express some feelings. So in music, they can express like, you hurt me, ow, I love you, those things. But there's a lot of stuff. And the main thing is anger, like that anger that women have that they can't get out. And so I quickly started developing all these like lyrical exercises and sonic exercises that align with feelings. Because I always say creating art is just two things, is having feelings and expressing them. So the first thing you have to do is have them in the first place. And you and I talk about this, and the work you do is alcohol and drugs, or any kind of addiction can function. So it functions as an anesthetic, and there's other ways that shows up with people trying to live their lives. Endless social media addiction, shopping addiction, and a preoccupation with this hypothetical chorus of critics. What will they think? What will they think? And I'm like, okay, let's unpack that. Who
exactly? Yeah.
Who? Yeah. And then it kind of, you realize that there's no monster in the closet. It's just a couple of frocks and a pair of shoes. And the terror of putting your heart and soul out in a public domain and then people not liking it can just feel impossible, And so a lot of women, when I start working with them, they start out and they are in a state of anesthetizing their feelings, except that they've gotten to a stage where they know something's up because they've been talking about this now for a couple of decades almost. One day I'm going to write the book. One day I'm going to write songs. One day I'm going to put an album out. One day. Oh, I'll do it when the kids have left home. Oh, I'll do it when I've got enough money. Oh, I'll do it when I can rent a castle tower in the west coast of Scotland. I'll do it after my parents pass, or whatever it is. It's just the endless postponing. And when they realise they catch themselves in the act of chronic procrastination, I think that urgency can become unmanageable and they want to get it out. And so a lot of the work I do is about just getting right back down to the feelings. Feelings have to be felt.
And that's
otherwise, that's where our work overlaps. And if they're not felt, they come knocking on the door forever.
And I have more than one client I can think of who I work with that I'm helping to get sober, who is writing a book or is a musician and does exactly what you say. And so my work is about sobriety. What it really is returning to ourselves. We've just left ourselves by degrees. And a lot of that is in the behavior. We just can't, I felt like that. I was behaving and showing up in the world in a way that wasn't who I was, but you all thought that's who I was because that's how I was behaving. And then that crushed me inside to think that people that I was presenting in this way, but I didn't know how not to be that way. And sobriety is this journey back to yourself and back to your, and there was no other way for me. There was no that. And part of that process was exactly letting go of the, what will people think? What if people don't like me if I don't drink? What if like all of that? And I sleep in my head tonight and I have to show up in the world in a way that means I can sleep in my head tonight, not you or anyone else. I have to. But I see that a lot with my clients who lots of books half written, waiting to be written, desperately wanting to be written. And the alcohol use is often the biggest way that they are procrastinating with that. And it's, like many industries, we need some more female voices.
Absolutely. There. Yeah, definitely. And women to engage all of their feelings and not just the ones that are palatable to society at large. And I think that, I don't think, like, first of all, you've got like white patriarchy and you have like the disempowerment of women's voices. And then on top of that, you have the internalization of a lot of cultural memes about what it means to be a woman, which is you have to be likable, you have to be good mother material, you have to be wife material, otherwise you're going to be lonely. And what that means is you cannot do anything musically or artistically that conveys anger, too much intellect, too much humor, anything remotely sexual. All of those things just get stuffed down. And and I'm not saying you have to have songs that encapsulate all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that when you're putting a body of work together, you do have to access all parts of us, every single bit. And that can be very difficult as well, because like trauma, for example, doesn't speak coherently about itself. So there's also that cognitive dissonance where you can have catharsis. You finally speak something to life. Like our friend Emma, who had so Emma was our friend that we were in Key West with, and she's written a phenomenal collection of poetry that she didn't intend to write, and it's all stories and tales and like magic realist abstract poems about her going through a horrifically scary cancer experience for I don't know how long it was, a year or something. And there is something about getting all that stuff up and out of your body and putting it somewhere. Because sometimes we have feelings that we just can't contain. And I think that's what art is for. Art is somewhere to put the feelings that we can't contain.
Ooh, that just blows my mind. Art is somewhere to put feelings that we can't contain. That just whole concept, because that's what I teach is emotional management, is that we didn't nobody taught me, and it wasn't role modeled how to deal with these feelings. And I had these massive feelings in a family that did not approve of massive feelings, do not, that's it. Their range was sort of, oh, that's nice and disappointing. Whereas I was like, and I had to push them down. And the only way I could push them down was alcohol and drugs, because I couldn't contain them anywhere else. There's so many things I'm thinking of when you were talking. So this is the parallels with our processes, is that it's becoming emotionally literate. So you can be sober, but emotionally literate, so you can also be your authentic self. And so much is art, really. We're not just talking about painting a picture or writing a song, right? So much
anything creatively, it's about authenticity. And by the way, you touched that, so it made me think about the sort of mystic status that being an artist has is also not helpful, because the primary thing that we want, and you talk about this a lot in your work, is connection. And art is just one way of having connection with fellow human beings. When we have feelings in us and we turn them into a sound, and they go into someone else's ears and then percolate through their heart and their mind, that's connection. And when I play live in a theatre, it's that connection. And I think that the work you do and the work I do, in a way, you take those difficult feelings and you actually alchemize them, because you turn like your overwhelming feelings that you had. I mean, you were a beautiful, like explosive teenager with all the angst and sensitivity and reading books and traveling and kind of trying your best. All that stuff that's very, very difficult becomes the very thing that is your torch to your future. You know what I mean? And so this makes me think about shame, because shame is like the biggest killer of living authentically, of living your life, of doing the very things you want to do, albeit writing a novel, creating an album, starting a business, doing whatever the thing is that you want. If you want to create a family with some, a shame will just continuously erode. And so when I run group programs with creative women, that's one thing that gets dealt with really, really well in a group, because they can give each other permission. And by osmosis, give themselves permission to feel feelings.
There's something there about the struggle as well. And I don't know about you, I find it really, the whole concept of struggle is, the struggle was a really essential part of my process. But I know, certainly with addiction, the struggle can also be lethal. Not everyone makes it through that. And I don't want my children to struggle like I did. But I also know it's really, the skills that you learn in the struggle are really important. And I don't want to steal that opportunity from my children, which is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I see going on in parenting. And this is a whole other avenue that we probably don't want to go down right now, but the whole concept of helicopter and bulldozer parenting is stealing the struggle from the children.
Yeah.
But there's something that's so essential in the struggle, right?
Definitely.
There's a paradox there. There's a conundrum there in that we don't want people we love to struggle, and we don't want the struggle to be lethal. But the struggle's really important.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. The struggle can become a cultural fetish though, as well. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like
in the artist, right?
Absolutely. And I think some of that can have roots in religious roots too, about piety, struggling, suffering makes you good, you know? And but within the idea in the popular imagination of the artist archetype is struggle, and particularly with women artists, of which not many people can name many, and the ones we can name always struggle. So Frida Kahlo struggled her whole life with horrific pain. Georgia O'Keeffe banished to the desert with alone. Virginia Woolf, suicidal. Sylvia Plath, all of that stuff is like that. We actually want them to struggle. We want them to suffer for their art because it fits this kind of unspoken paradigm at play, and which generates its own set of fear. But actually, in real life, people I know in my family who have chronic addictions and alcoholism, they're not creating art. You know, it isn't linked to art. That's a big lie. And I know artists who've gone into recovery, fearing that they will lose that magic and lose that muse, and find that actually they write the book that gets them the national awards and their career starts flying and endless creative fulfillment. What you get is yourself.
Can we talk about that? Because that also comes up in my work a lot with people, and the very entrenched belief system that the alcohol and the drugs is essential to their creativity. And this kind of fear that if they stop drinking, that the magic will be gone. And I personally think that's bullshit. And I think there's lots of evidence of that, in that people have been, there's lots of artists we know who've been heavily influenced by alcohol and drugs and have produced great art. And it's not because of, it's despite of.
Yeah.
And that's why that generally runs out in their 30s and certainly in their 40s, because it's unsustainable. And there's lots of, there's so many people that you wouldn't be aware of who are sober, have been sober a long time and are still producing incredible music. That the whole, it's the Ernest Hemingway, Jimi Hendrix,
Van Gogh,
that kind of whole.
Amy Winehouse. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What do you come across that kind of whole belief that?
Yeah, it's so funny.
What do you see?
It's literally that. In my world that I operate in, it's almost it's like the opposite of the reality that I inhabit. Not that my band don't sometimes go out for drinks or whatever, but if you have a deeply compulsive addiction of that level, you can't be present in your work. And you're going to really struggle to get up in time. You're going to be late for sound checks. You're going to not be there in the studio at 10 o'clock to set up. Or you're not going to play well because you are there, but you're hungover as hell and you're struggling through the minutes. So the people that actually make it in my industry that might not be household name icons, but really, really do well, thank you very much, and tour all over the world, are really not in any way living with chronic compulsive drinking addictions, because actually you can't.
No, you can't. No. That's why the artists who've been heavily under the influence, who produce great art, by their 30s, they're usually sober, because you just can't carry on.
So that, like you say, so there's loads of elder artists who are just in sobriety. God, I meet them all the time. You know, some household
Yeah.
names that people don't realise are
They're all sober.
or sober. You know they are, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing the job. I mean, you know that. I think that all the time.
My husband Rob was reading a piece about, he loves Fleetwood Mac, and he was reading about Fleetwood. He read this whole piece, he sent it to me, and he said he was really disappointed because he, in the piece, it was written by someone who worked closely with them. I can't remember who it was. I think someone who produced an album with them. And he said, like, they're absolute, all of them are assholes. He said they're just absolutely horrible human beings. He said, I was so like disappointed because I love Stevie Nicks and I said that they come from that era when music bands of that type were making so much money, and everyone around them they could just do whatever they wanted. There was no responsibility. They had hundreds of people around them getting them to the studio, getting them to the stage. Every whim was catered for because there was so much money involved in that band that I don't know if we have bands like that anymore, because it's all changed with them. How much money they make from records, that kind of stuff. And just the alcohol and drugs that were, and I mean, then they were a pretty creative band, but I think Stevie Nicks has been sober a long time. I think most of them have, because it's just completely unsustainable. But I don't think we have that kind of era of that kind of 70s, 80s, big, massive band excess. I think do you think, I think that's all gone now, because
I wouldn't
so
say
much of the industry.
I wouldn't say, I mean, I know players that work with massive stars, and they probably, that while they're not shooting up drugs every night or anything, they're probably indulging a bit more than, say, people who are on the folk circuit and jazz circuit. I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely eliminated. And also with Fleetwood Mac, there's so much personal dysfunction, wasn't there? They were all, they were like, forget a love triangle, they were like in a love hexagon, weren't they? I mean, you can't even keep track of it. Who was writing this song for you, and then she's jealous of him, and he's in love with her, and I need like a whole flip chart. I can't follow it all. And that becomes part of the drama, part of the and then you can go off and write songs, because people still think that to create anything, it's like you have to inflict these wounds on yourself. That's a complete myth. It's absolutely a myth, and it's sad as well, because people have suffered, like Amy Winehouse or Vincent van Gogh, mentally ill and with genuine hardship and suffering in their lives, and it becomes, like I said earlier, a fetish. Actually, the very thing that people enjoy most about them is their destruction of themselves, and linking that to their output, and therefore it's I need to unpack my thoughts a bit around this, but I feel like it's linked to personal responsibility in some way. It's like, what do you get out of that belief that if I create art, then I inherently have to be in this kind of zone of something emotionally dangerous, or alcohol, drugs. And with women, there's an extra layer, because artists in our culture are bad mothers. You can't be an artist and a mother at the same time.
Yes. And can we talk a little bit about that?
If you start looking around you, you'll start noticing it. Like, think about people like Courtney Love or Polystyrene. There was a great documentary on this punk singer in Britain, that they end up, abandoning the kids for the music. It's another big layer of bullshit that gets inflicted on people. And so when I get women come to me, they're often like, I work with women from age 18 to 62 at the moment, but often it's like in their late 30s or early 40s, and they've got all this talent, like volcanic in them, with nowhere to go, and they can't get out. And all these layers of absolute codswallop that they've swallowed up.
Or the other thing is they don't become mothers. And there's a whole kind of stigma. Like, I'm thinking of Stevie Nicks and, and there's a whole stigma attached to that, and there's so much to
Absolutely.
unpack.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so I know what I was going to say. There's these parameters that are put on women that we all grow up with. They're in our subconscious. They're limiting beliefs about what's acceptable, possible for you to be liked and loved. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I do with my clients, and in fact, I just did this a couple of weeks ago with my emotional sobriety group, about resentments. And we go through a process where we look at our resentments. And resentments are when things that rent space in your head, like that just go over and over, that you feel an injustice or you feel pissed off about. And every single time I do this with a group of women, there's all kinds of resentment, against, there's petty ones, about where then your neighbor parks their car, and there's big ones against like your mother or your partner or whatever. But what always comes up underneath, what's always uncovered in this process that we go through eventually is the patriarchy, the patriarchal stuff that was put on them that limits them. And it all comes into it's all in the limiting beliefs about not being good enough, and it's all to do with external patriarchal expectations of being a woman and being a mother. And a lot of the process of sobriety is I mean, I don't know if we can get out of it, but we can be aware of it and move some of it. And it's really incredible how that just has kept so many women small and drunk and limited. And it's all belief systems that we don't realize that we can change.
No,
I mean, you must have
exactly.
seen some extraordinary stuff with what's it like taking a woman through this process and seeing her in the what will people
honestly
think?
it's like it's mind-blowing and humbling. And I mean, this year I'm putting out about 6 albums on my record label, some which I've produced, most of which I've produced.
You sent me one, it was amazing. I can't remember who it was. It's really
Susie
incredible.
Thomas or Jessica B, that's her EP. And it's like for most of them, not all, but for most of these women to start off with their songs and then fast forward a year and they've got this amazing album and it's been put out, published, the PR, the whole thing, the launches, everything's happening, it's incredible. I can't tell you how happy I am about it. But I was thinking as well, when you were talking, it's like there's this book by E.M. Forster called The Machine Stops. And it's about a dystopian society in the future that's run by a machine and nobody knows it. They only notice it when the machine stops. They hear the humming that had been going on their whole life when someone switches it off. And sometimes the work we do is that. It's like you only notice it has been on the whole time when you switch it off.
Yeah.
And it is all those limiting beliefs. They're insidious and they creep into the way we live, the choices we make, or the choices we think we're making, or the fact we think we have no choice, which is often something that comes along. And it's an absolute Gideon's knot of stuff.
What would you say to a woman who's listening to this, who's just sitting there like bursting because she is that woman? She's procrastinating, getting lost in the details of her life and missing the main event, who's just bursting to write something, sing something.
I'd say to her to go over to my website and subscribe and come along to one of my free workshops, because I'm always doing free workshops on the creativity mindset and getting going. And if it felt like something that could help, to come along and join that. Because I think, like the E.M. Foster allegory there about the machine stops, a lot of women think, oh, well, that isn't me. The reason I haven't done it yet is because I have kids to look after and I have roommates and I have, there's all the stuff.
Yeah.
And those things are true and real. What it boils down to is activating the agency we do have. And I think that in our society, we've got the victim victimology, and then we have this sort of toxic positivity. And actually in the middle, we have, if we're lucky enough to live in a Western democratic society, we have some agency. So we don't have all the choices in the world, but we have some choices. And it's about activating the choices that we can and deciding what we want to do with the choices that we do have. And that can feel uncomfortable for people. So if you are an artistic woman and you feel like you notice you are endlessly delaying doing the work, doing the music, doing the novel, whatever it is you want to do, come to my website, sarahgillespie.com, and my academy website is called createacademy.org, I believe. And you can just sign up and pop along to the free workshops that we do.
So this is exactly an absolute parallel with my work. And this is exactly what I tell women when they get sober, is that this has to be your main thing. This isn't something you can't get sober just with like, oh, I've got an hour free on Thursday. You just, so of course, you have to pay your rent and do your laundry and take the trash out. Those things have to be done, right? I get that. But this has to be your main thing, because with drinking, you'll discover that actually, I can get you back. Here's the thing. I can get you back several hours, like usually 20, 30 hours a month that you can use to focus on your sobriety and your personal development. And I think women are busy, and the burden of childcare and domestic chores does fall to women. However, it's exactly what you're saying. If this is burning inside you, it needs to be your main event. Get the laundry done, but this needs to be your main event, because it's the same thing. There's so many ways that, because sobriety and producing your art is about being your authentic self, and I think that there's also something quite scary about that. Exactly. And this sort of I just need to sort the attic out, and then it's like no. What will matter more in 10 years? That's a question that I give my clients. This will clear away the crap. What will matter more in 10 years? Will it matter that you did your laundry or cleaned the attic out, or that you put some notes down, did the song, or went to the support meeting and wrote your step one or whatever it is? That's actually what will matter more in 10 years. And it really kind of cleans that crap away. And I think there's a lot more to said about here, that these are both journeys to the authentic self, because there is, for people like us, there's no other way to live. To not live that way is so painful for me that I have to seek an anesthetic. It's so painful to not be who I am, which is sometimes scary. And I don't know quite what's going to happen, and I have no idea if you'll approve of it, but there's no other way for me. And I know it's the same for you. There's no other way for you than to be
absolutely not
who you are.
Yep, absolutely. And part of that work is learning to cope with the possible disapproval of others. It's like women come to me and they're like, but what if nobody likes my songs? And I'm like, what if nobody likes your songs? Oh, nobody will if you never write them. That's guaranteed. And if you never put them out, they're definitely not going to like them then. They're definitely not going to like them. And when what I say to them as well is, like, I think particularly in what I do is, like, you see all my best reviews, my most flattering photographs, a succinct CV like the one you read out at the beginning of this, which can kind of alienate people and make them think, oh God, that's something like that I could never achieve. And it is, there is a lot of stuff that goes into it,
Yes.
Just loads
there's
of
a lot
work.
of mistakes and messes.
Yes.
And wrong turns.
Yes.
Like, don't think that we don't have all of those things, because those things do.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good to point out. Yeah. So before we end, I know people will kill me if you don't tell me a little bit about the song that has been playing at the beginning of our podcast for the last 5 years. Can you just tell people a little bit about that and where they can find it? Because it's not on an album, is it?
No, I think it's just floating
Jasmine.
about on YouTube. Yeah, and I
It was one of your. We used it because it was the one of the few ones that you had that was unlicensed, but the lyrics in it just are perfect for this podcast.
Yeah, and it's so funny because the way I write songs, I often don't know what I'm writing about.
Huh.
It's sort of like or sometimes I find out at the end, and I go, of course, and It's like the unconscious. It's like dreaming, like in one way you're the author of your dreams, but in another way you're the audience, and and that's how it feels often when I write songs. So for all I know, I could have been tapping into stuff that you and I were talking about, or that I've experienced or I've seen. Sometimes those things just come out. But I know that it's sort of through a complete act of serendipity, the lyrics fitted perfectly with this podcast. I came to in the morning and I took it as a warning. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I loved it. It was so perfect.
And so and coming to in the morning could be like waking up with a hangover, and coming to like from just like how you wake up in life and go, shit, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to commit to myself. I'm going to make a decision. Yeah. I'm going to do the thing.
Yeah.
That's another way of waking up.
Yeah. 100%. So sarahgillespie.com, if people want to find more about you. You're on social media. You've got a Facebook group. Just where can people find you? So
if you go to, it's Facebook, whatever the Facebook thing is, facebook.com/Create Now Academy. If you Google Create Now Academy, Sarah Gillespie, you'll find all those things. Yeah. And the private Facebook group has got stuff about workshops and different conversations about art and inspiration and women in art and all that kind of stuff in there as well. And your music is available on all platforms, Spotify, and that's the stuff I actually want people to really check out. Because what's the album that Glory Days is on? That's Glory Days is the name of the album. Is it called the album's called Glory Days? All right, okay. That's my favorite album, Glory Days. So check that out. Sarah's music. She's been compared to Bob Dylan. She's been compared to a lot of incredible artists. They're really, I'm incredibly biased, but her music is incredible, and I can't wait for the new. I really, literally cannot wait for the new album to come out and the tour and everything. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being my friend for so many years, and thank you for being mine. Seeing me through so many. You saw the worst of it, really. I mean, you saw. I did. Absolutely. All of it. The drunkenness, the panic attacks. Oh. And I can't imagine getting through life without all of the different stages like that we go through of aging and motherhood and all of getting married, all that kind of stuff without you. So divorced. I hope you guys. Oh God. Oh dear. And we're very grateful to that guy. All those, I mean, this may never have happened without him. We may have just been like, all right, it was maybe that rivalry and hatred. Without that, maybe my life, God, I wouldn't have gone to America. It's incredible to think that. It's crazy. Let us know what you think about the podcast. I'll have links to Sarah's stuff in the show notes, and I will be back with you next week. Take care, everybody.